AITA for exposing my husband's affair with his girl best friend at a family barbecue. I immediately dropped the phone in shock, my heart racing. The reality of what I had just discovered hit me like a ton of bricks. I could barely breathe as the tears started to well up in my eyes. I had always trusted Jake, and now all of that trust seemed like it was in vain. I couldn't believe what I had just read. He had been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back with Megan, the one person who had always made me feel uneasy. I couldn't even process everything at once, but one thing was certain: I had to confront him. When Jake came out of the shower, I was standing there, holding his phone in my trembling hands. His face fell when he saw the look on my face. He knew something was wrong. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern, but it sounded hollow to me. I couldn't even speak at first. I just stared at him, tears streaming down my face. Finally, I managed to say, "How long, Jake? How long have you been cheating on me with Megan?" His face went white, and for a moment, he looked completely stunned. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, trying to deny it, but I wasn't having it. I threw the phone at him, and he caught it in a panic. I watched as his face changed, guilt and fear overtaking his features. How long, Jake? How long have you been lying to me?" I demanded, my voice trembling with both anger and hurt. He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I felt like my world was crashing down. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean for this to happen." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My whole life with him, everything I had trusted, felt like a lie. The fact that he didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth, to come clean before I found out like this, it felt like a betrayal I couldn't ever forgive. "I don't want your apology, Jake. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" I asked again, my voice shaking with fury. Jake dropped his head in shame. "A few months," he admitted. "It started out as just innocent texting, but it got complicated. I couldn't look at him anymore. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or just walk out the door. I was overwhelmed with so many emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. How could he do this to me? How could he betray our vows, our marriage? I had trusted him, and he had thrown that trust away without a second thought. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze. My thoughts were racing, and I couldn't think straight. I barely ate or slept that night. The next day, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and deceit. I needed space, time to figure out what I wanted. But I also knew that confronting Jake's family, especially Megan and his father, was going to be the hardest part. A week later, we were invited to a family barbecue. I knew Jake was nervous about how things were going to play out, but I was beyond caring at that point. I wasn't going to sit there in silence, pretending everything was fine when I knew what was really going on. I had spent far too long being dismissed and ignored, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. If his family was going to make me feel like the problem, I was going to make sure they knew exactly what Jake had done. As soon as we arrived at the barbecue, I could feel the tension in the air. Jake's family was all smiles, but I could sense that they knew something was off. His mother, Carol, gave me a warm hug, and I tried to smile back, but it felt fake. I wanted to tell her everything right there, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to make a scene, at least, not yet. Jake's dad, Steve, approached us shortly after. He greeted me with a pat on the back and a smirk. "So, how's everything going?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Not great, actually, I replied, my voice colder than I intended. Steve chuckled. Ah, come on, Sarah. You've got to stop overthinking everything. Jake's a good guy. You just need to get used to Megan being around. She's practically family. I felt my blood boil. I had spent years trying to be patient, trying to be understanding, and here Steve was, still defending Megan as if she could do no wrong. No, Steve, I said firmly. I'm done getting used to it. I'm done pretending like everything is fine when I know it's not. Steve looked confused, and then a bit defensive. What are you talking about? Jake has been cheating on me with Megan, I blurted out. The words felt like they were searing through me, but I said them anyway. For months. And I found out. So don't tell me to get used to it, because I'm done. There was a long silence. Steve's face went pale, and everyone at the barbecue stopped talking. The sound of sizzling burgers on the grill seemed distant and muffled. I could feel the stares of his family members, but I didn't care. This was the truth, and I wasn't going to hide it anymore. Jake stood there, frozen, his face full of guilt and shock. Megan, who had been standing nearby, looked horrified as she realized I had exposed them both. She tried to speak, but I raised my hand, stopping her. No, Megan. I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with both fury and betrayal. I'm done being made a fool of. I trusted you both. And now, I'm walking away from this. Steve, still in shock, tried to step in. Sarah, you're overreacting. This isn't the time or place for this. No, Steve, you're wrong. This is exactly the time, I snapped. You've all made me feel like I was the problem for years, defending her and pushing me aside. Well, now you know the truth. The barbecue was a mess after that. Jake tried to apologize, but his words were empty. His family was left in stunned silence. I didn't stay long. I grabbed my purse and walked out, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I had exposed the truth, but I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Jake would try to fix things, but I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him again. I wasn't the one in the wrong here, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel like I was. So, was I the a-hole for exposing my husband's affair at a family barbecue after his dad told me to get over it? No, I wasn't the a-hole for standing up for myself, for refusing to let them make me feel like I was the problem. I had the right to expose the truth, and I was done living in denial. The hardest part of all this was realizing that sometimes the people we trust the most can hurt us the most. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done being anyone's doormat. When Jake came out of the shower that day, I didn't expect things to go the way they did. My heart was racing, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but I couldn't hold back. The lies, the betrayal, it all came crashing down on me in that moment. I stood there, looking at him, waiting for him to say something, anything, to explain why everything I thought I knew about our marriage was a lie. He didn't deny it. His face turned pale, a guilty look washing over him like a wave. He didn't even try to hide the shame in his eyes. I'm so sorry, he said, voice trembling. I made a huge mistake. It meant nothing, I swear. Please, don't leave me. I wanted to scream, to throw the words I'd been holding inside for months in his face. But there was a lump in my throat, and my anger was suffocated by the wave of hurt and confusion that hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt numb. My hands shook, my stomach twisted into knots. but I couldn't bring myself to yell. Instead, I stayed silent, trying to process the truth that had just shattered my world. He begged me over and over again, pleading for my forgiveness, swearing that he loved me, that it would never happen again. His words echoed in my mind, but none of them felt real. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk out that door and never look back, but another part of me, broken, vulnerable, wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could make it right. But in that moment, I couldn't make a decision. So I stayed quiet, not knowing what else to do, my heart in pieces on the floor. I needed time. Time to think, to process, to understand how everything had fallen apart. A couple of weeks later, when my in-laws decided to host a family barbecue, I was nowhere near ready to face the world, let alone the family that had always been there. But Jake insisted. He said it was important. It wasn't just about us, it was about appearances. We had to show everyone that we were working on things, that everything was fine. He made me feel guilty for even thinking about backing out. "It'll be okay," he said. "We'll get through this together." But how could I? How could I pretend everything was fine when my world had just collapsed? Still, I couldn't bring myself to be the one to cause drama. So I agreed, though every part of me screamed in protest. I wasn't ready to face Megan, the woman who had been sleeping with my husband behind my back. The one whose presence in my life was now a constant reminder of the betrayal. But I went. I showed up, putting on a mask of normalcy, pretending that I was okay. But inside, I was anything but. As soon as I stepped onto the patio, the tension hit me like a physical blow. I felt like everyone could see right through me, like they knew the truth, knew the pain I was carrying. Every smile, every glance, felt like an accusation. My hands clenched at my sides, and my stomach churned with anxiety. And then, there she was. Megan. She waltzed in like nothing had happened, smiling and laughing as if she hadn't just torn my world apart. She was acting so casual, so comfortable with everyone. She greeted Jake with a hug and a smile, like the affair had never happened. She looked so at ease, so innocent, and I was dying inside. I tried to keep my composure, to smile and make small talk, but it was impossible. Every time Megan spoke to Jake, every time they laughed or exchanged a look, I felt my blood boil. The anger, the betrayal, it surged through me. How dare she act like everything was fine? How dare she waltz into my life like she hadn't just destroyed everything I held dear? But it wasn't just her. It was the whole atmosphere of the barbecue. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it all felt like a cruel reminder that my life, my marriage, was nothing but a joke. I was surrounded by people who had no idea what was really going on, and it felt like I was suffocating under the weight of the lies. And then, my father-in-law made the comment that pushed me over the edge. "Megan will always be part of this family, Sarah," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You just need to get over your insecurities. She's like a sister to Jake, and you need to deal with it." The words stung, but what hurt more was how nonchalant he was. As if it were no big deal. As if my husband's affair, the one that had torn me apart, was something I should just get over. I couldn't take it. Not anymore. The anger that had been bubbling inside me for weeks erupted, and I stood up, my heart racing, my hands shaking with emotion. "You know what?" I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "I would get over it if she wasn't sleeping with my husband." The room went dead silent. It felt like time stopped. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. and every pair of eyes was on me. Megan's face drained of color, and Jake looked like he had been slapped. He tried to step forward, to calm me down, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was done. I wasn't going to hide the truth any longer. I turned to the rest of the family, tears welling in my eyes, and I let them have it. I told them everything. The affair, the lies, the hurt, the devastation. I spoke of the pain I had been carrying for months, how I had tried to keep it together, to pretend everything was fine, all while the people I loved and trusted were shattering my heart. My mother-in-law, Carol, was furious, but her anger wasn't directed at me. No, she laid into Jake and Megan, telling them that they had destroyed our marriage and disrespected me in the worst possible way. I could see the fire in her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone understood. It was a small comfort, but it meant the world to me. But then, my father-in-law had the audacity to defend Megan. He didn't see the betrayal. He didn't understand the hurt. Affairs happen, he said, his voice casual, dismissive. You shouldn't air this out in front of the family. Megan made a mistake. We should all move on. I was stunned. I had just exposed my soul to everyone, and he was telling me to move on like it was no big deal. As if my pain, my heartache, didn't matter. I couldn't take it. I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking with fury and hurt, and I walked out of the barbecue, not looking back. I needed to get away. I needed space to breathe, to think, to process everything. So I went straight to my mom's house, the only place where I could find some semblance of peace. Jake has been begging me to come back, telling me he's sorry, that he'll do anything to fix it. But I'm not sure I can believe him anymore. My mother-in-law has been supportive, but my father-in-law? He's been telling the whole family that I'm causing drama, that I'm blowing everything out of proportion. He's even said that I'm just jealous and need to get over it. Now I'm left wondering, was I wrong for exposing their affair at the barbecue? Should I have kept it to myself, protected the family's image, and just tried to move on? Or was I right to call them out, to let everyone know the truth after everything I'd been through? I don't know the answer, but one thing's for sure, I'm done pretending. The truth is out, and now I just have to figure out how to move forward.